Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Let's hop in. I always find it a little weird that there's a 2020 copyright and then there's a 2022 copyright from a different company at the beginning of this app. It's a little weird that the date doesn't just dynamically update, because I guess inherently you could program it to put the copyright symbol and have the computer program itself claim copyright always, although maybe then that would put you in some legal jeopardy because there was no actual human hand or action to say specifically that you actually do claim copyright for that specific year, which that might hurt you in some kind of court case, but probably wouldn't, since copyright is so bent in one direction to protect content owners, and so not bent in any way to protect fair use or public domain or the general public. I'm trying something different today with the audio. I've enabled the cheapest, as far as CPU usage, noise reduction. So effectively what that will do, I think, is hopefully it does some actual noise reduction when I'm speaking, and when I go silent it should do some decent amount of noise reduction for at least a few seconds. I'll go quiet here for a second, and what I'll notice though is that if you go 4 or 5 seconds in a row of silence, then it starts to think, well, I'm not hearing anything, so let's bring the noise back in. See, and yeah, they're in that silence looking at the sound bars, not being able to 100% listen and monitor the mix of everything at the moment. It does definitely feel like it went straight down to 0 and then it came back up after a second or two, and that there are some odd bumps. That being said, I certainly could implement higher levels of quality noise reduction, but it would use more CPU. And one of my goals in reinstalling OBS is to not have the recording software just use a massive amount of CPU processing power and adding effectively overhead to the whole process. Let's see. What's the best way to play this? See, it seems like the best way to play this would be to activate this. I guess maybe toss this. Put this here. Summon this. Activate that ability. Toss this one. Hey, if I had activated this ability first, I guess I could have then tossed this with that. That would have been even better. Then I think you have to go 3, because really it's only at that point where You then can go 4. Then we can activate this ability and toss the third one. Interesting. That ability did not work. Let's see, I think what that means is now when I go to activate this ability, all I can really do is attach one of those cards, which that doesn't really help anything. And I'm actively not trying to take up a spot here. Alright. I could potentially use this ability to summon something, but it's a little premature and unnecessary. It kind of doesn't matter because this guy's just not played any kind of defensive maneuver or counter maneuver to my strategies at all, so I'm fairly well suited. And, like, he didn't even put a character up for me to potentially use this to toss another card. Okay, so for the accountability section over the weekend, I did actually finally get started playing a game called Max the Cursed Brotherhood. It is a puzzle platformer that is kind of in the Prince of Persia style, I would say, in that it is actively having places where you can just land on platforms and they fall out from under you, or spikes will fall from the ceiling. It's kind of like Sonic in the sense that you just don't know what's off the screen or what's about to happen until it actually happens, so you are just going to die a lot, which is weird because it really is a kid's game. It does have a gimmick that makes it feel like it really should have been a Nintendo DS game, and yet I'm fairly certain came out for the Xbox during the Summer of Code, in which you can pull up this giant marker and draw on the screen to not just draw lines out of nowhere, but you can, in specific points of power, draw up the earth or draw branches or draw vines. And I imagine, I'm fairly certain that eventually I'll be able to draw flows of water. It doesn't seem like they're going to do anything with air, but it's a decent gimmick that doesn't particularly pair as well as you would like with the 3D platforming. What's weird about it, I would say, is that you get this good average pace through 90% of each level, and then you will have at some point a very difficult like action that is required of you that is like way more difficult, and you'll just end up dying 2 or 3 times, going back to the checkpoint and having to do it over and over again. For a kids game, those kinds of difficulty spikes really don't work well. But yeah, it definitely comes off like it's a indie game that maybe got some support or funding by Microsoft for a Summer of Code, but really didn't get enough support or funding to make it stand out and be special. It's giving achievements, certainly like an Xbox 360 game did during the early days of achievements. It just all over the place. There are like one secret collectible and somewhere between 3 and 5 regular collectibles in each level. So overall in the entire game there's only like 75 regular collectibles, which you would expect that number to be at least 100. There, I've countered Max C just so he doesn't get extra cards. Which is not really a great reason to use Ash Blossom, but whatever. But yeah, there's some odd camera Dutch angles and a lot of over focus on visuals, I think, in the game, where the physics of the game being a Unity, kind of what you would consider a Unity indie game by modern standards, physics aren't quite as polished and smooth as you would like. The death sequences are longer than what you would want. Like, there's a lot of pits you can fall down and just instantly die, and there should be like a Prince of Persia time rewind mechanism instead, or the pits should just have bottoms, and then there should be a slow punishing ladder climb out of the pit always, instead of killing the character off. The main character vocalizes while not really saying anything a little bit too much. There's a lot of ooh and ah and screaming, which we would expect from a little kid, but then you also have the main character not really written as much as a little kid. You have him trying to save his little brother, who he himself accidentally put in danger, and he's just from the word go from the first cutscene, which there's too many cutscenes in the first part of the game. They slow down near the end, near the halfway point, which is about where I am. But yeah, you never see him really show any emotion or anything like that. Instead, he's just gung-ho to start running and jumping and swinging and doing things that would be incredibly scary for most people. And he just takes it like it's his destiny, which yeah, that is very much a fantasy fulfillment type thing, I would say. So like it's a good average game. The problem I'm mostly having with it, though, I will say, is there's just not any getting around the disruptions and distractions. I'm trying to make 30-minute episodes, so I'm going through like 1 or 2 levels, and there's probably not that many levels even in the game to start with. I think that there's probably about 5 chapters with 4 or 5 levels, so you're talking maybe 25 levels in general, and the levels tend not to be super long, some have been longer than others. But yeah, whether I play for 2 hours to make a 2-hour episode, or whether I play for 30 minutes to play a 30-minute episode, the disruption immediately happens after I make that one episode. Like, I'm just never in the mood mentally to power through it and make a second episode. Now, Max the Curse of Brotherhood is also not particularly the most enthralling of video games in the first place, so maybe if I was playing a more interesting game, that would be less of an issue. But for the most part, whenever I have an opportunity to procrastinate, I subconsciously and consciously decide to procrastinate. It doesn't really seem to matter how long or it's been. At a certain point, you might go ahead and just assume that that's a level of mental exhaustion, is that I'm just always at a high level of mental exhaustion, even if there's not a good reason for that. And certainly there's been decent distractions. There's this Roku channel called Freevee that I just found, which probably has been around for a little bit, that feels like it is in some way a split off from, I'd have to just assume, what the glory days at one point of what the glory days of Hulu were once. Alright, let's activate this. And Freevee doesn't have the worst model in that you can watch a decent collection of old shows and like cable shows. In particular, I was watching the last couple episodes of Warehouse 13 because I saw that Warehouse 13 was being marathoned on the Sci-Fi channel, which at a certain point I think that's probably just an admission by the Sci-Fi channel that nothing they have is particularly that good that's new. Yeah, I'm not particularly happy with Yu-Gi-Oh! Introducing all of these animations, or introducing new spell activations, and then not really having a way to turn them off by default, and only having a way to turn them off after the fact, after the first animation being shown. But I guess that's, at a certain level, them just being perhaps overly proud of their animations. But yeah, I was trying to figure out what happened at the ending of Warehouse 13, and if anything, I wasn't really shown too much by watching the last two episodes, other than there seems to be a kind of continuous changing of who the big bad guy was supposed to be or was. Which arguably Warehouse 13 probably shouldn't have had a big bad guy in the first place. There is definitely a reboot around the idea of items with magical powers. In general, you do it without blowing the budget with transition scenes, which there was a lot of animation and transition scenes in Warehouse 13. And you wouldn't have 5 like main characters on top of having probably 2 or 3 other secondary characters, blowing the budget on the number of actors. And you probably wouldn't give the main characters like magic psychic powers, which was another thing that they kind of started with, and you probably wouldn't have the magic items directly connected to historical figures or incidences, because it then made the whole show feel a little too History Channel-y. The other thing, though, that would hurt making something like Warehouse 13 and just rebooting it, which is pretty much all you could do with the series after the last episode, would be uh, would be to have it have a consistent narrative, because there's not really room in modern times for standalone episode of the week type shows, and I just don't see how that would change. Like, I think I already mentioned that I watched the Sandman series on Netflix, and that's kind of a great example of a show that is getting a bit of a free pass for being episodic, while still having a underlying narrative, where House 13 never had really an underlying narrative. Like they never really had a plan, which you definitely would want to have more of a plan there. You can definitely tell that since there's only like 6 episodes in the 5th season, which definitely says, oh yeah, that they were canceled. But the Sci-Fi Channel does that a lot, and they don't even cancel things like in a good way, that you would say here's enough time to finish things up or wrap things up by the end of the season. Speaking of other sci-fi channels, with MGM has been acquired by Amazon Prime, so Amazon Prime Video, so there is a small chance that there could be a new Stargate series and a new RoboCop series, but there are very few other franchises. Maybe some Tom and Jerry stuff. Very few other franchises that seem to be actually owned by MGM. Grant the James Bond series, but then you have to have approval from the family estate for anything too, so that's not like they have full ownership of that. I think the same is probably to be said with the Lord of the Rings series. And it's questionable whether Amazon Prime Video cares to actually make anything with the acquisitions they made, or whether they just wanted access to the back catalog. But yeah, the Sandman series, I won't talk about it a second time. First season. I watched a YouTube video kind of talk about it, and I think there were just some aspects that I misremembered. It's probably been close to 10 years, if not longer, since I read the Sandman comic book. It's been 35 years since the comic book has actually been out, so I was very late to the party anyways. But yeah, in looking at a comparison YouTube video, there were more changes than what I remember. A lot of it just to get rid of the DC connection of it being set in the DC universe and making it more like realistic. Much like the Lock and Key series, there's a highly stylized animation style that you just have to kind of throw away to make a live action version of the show. So, like I had said, I thought Lucifer had already left Hell by the first time Sandman entered Hell. Apparently he enters it a second time later on, so that is That is a slight change from what I remember, but apparently not that much of a difference. So yeah, I still think it's a fine show to watch, and it will expose a new audience to the general theme if it can actually stick the landing. The danger, certainly, though, with the Sandman Netflix series is still, and I probably said this before last time I talked about it, the danger is that they're going to change the main theme or the main story or try to go further, where they've stayed fairly consistent so far with converting the comic book stories over. I also found out that there was a Sandman comic I probably didn't read called Sandman Overture, which is kind of a prequel / sequel to the main story. But I'm not sure I actually believe that any of the spin-off comics are that good. It's kind of like the Watchmen sequel comics, is that these are these comics that were very popular and things of their time, but there's no way to recapture that lightning and make sequels, and almost always when they try to do it, particularly in comics, it's just pathetic additions. It would have been interesting, certainly, to see the Sandman or Lock and Key done in some kind of rotoscoping or animation style that would have been similar to the way it was actually drawn and animated in the comics, but I think very few people would have been willing to watch it at that point. I think you're just doing animation for your own ego at that point. And that is true for the other show I watched, which obviously over this weekend I spent a lot of time watching TV, which I do too much of that for somebody who's trying to at some point also get back to playing Zelda Breath of the Wild and trying to make footage and trying to schedule videos when there are videos to actually schedule. But yeah, there's this Amazon Prime series called Undone, which they made a second season for, and what's unique about that is the fact that it is rotoscoped. So it's live action actors who I have to wonder if they aren't actually just actors who recognize that they've had some level of scars on their face, or that they just do not look that good on HD, and thus they had the whole show cast and crewed with people who don't look that good on TV anymore but can actually act, and they rotoscoped the whole show because of that. Now there is definitely a sci-fi element to it that the rotoscoping helps with, but it really only helps with a few scenes, and you could have done that with just standard CG, certainly. So by the second season in particular, it doesn't really feel like there is a lot of value in having rotoscoping happen. I guess I am just going to consistently cancel Maxi. I'm not doing particularly good today, as far as trying to win. But Undone is a somewhat frustrating series in that it's all around the ideas of a mystery going back and changing the past and investigating the past to undo some travesty. And then yet at the beginning of the first season and the second season, you are still left in this position where the main character is either still somewhat questioning their sanity, or they are in a universe that everyone around them at least questions their sanity. And so, particularly at the end of the second season, she had the main character had accomplished everything she had. It's a female main character, and she was happy as she's ever probably going to be, and yet she still chooses to leave that reality and go to the reality where she had accomplished nothing. Just for the sake of a potential sequel. In fact, it would have made a lot of sense to cut the last episode of the second season and just end the series there, or in the season there, and then if you were going to get another season, then start with a new problem a couple years later or 1 year later. Like, go with kind of a Chronicles of Narnia idea, because in the Chronicles of Narnia series, like at the end of each book everything is fairly well suited, and then the next book is either the same kids several years older, or it is different kids, or a collection of the same kids and different kids, and then there's a new problem and a new story. I think TV probably is pretty bad about doing that, where every season feels like it needs to directly connect to the next season. Where it doesn't really have to be that way. If at the end of a season of Lost everybody was fairly happy, and then the next season some new problem happened or some new enemies appeared, that would be okay. Alright, well, I guess you activate this guy. To destroy this. So then you can activate this. I did need to do that. I didn't have enough cards otherwise. But yeah, TV is certainly dead by modern standards compared to the old days. There's just kind of nothing good being made, no new shows consistently being made. And when things do come out, even on these streaming services, which, yeah, HBO Max looks like it's going to be merged into Discovery Plus, and potentially it'll set itself up to be a new actual competitor to Disney Plus. But even at that, I just don't think you see a lot of new content or good content being made. There's less of a push, less of a force there. In the old days, you needed a show for prime time, like every Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 p.m., as it were. Like, you needed that 3 hours of content to be filled every single day, and that created a need to make a lot of content, and at a very small, narrow window of time, there was a lot of competition, and we actually got some decent content. I would say that window of time was probably somewhere right before the writer's strike that canceled Heroes or ruined Heroes. That was probably the peak of good primetime entertainment there, but I would also say that peak may have been more of a plateau because there's was a decent attempts for at least I would say a decade before that, throughout that previous decade, um, because there was some real effort that is just not there anymore, and it's mostly because they're not willing to pay writers and they're doing a lot of like fake Survivor type shows or drama shows like Real Housewives. But a lot of it I think is just laziness or lack of skill transferring from one generation to the other. There was probably not an apprenticeship system instilled for writers and TV creators and directors and actors, and arguably that should be addressed even now. Like, otherwise you're gonna have fewer and fewer people that can actually even write or do anything well. And that is why you see things like the Sandman series taking writing from comic book writers that were done 35 years ago and then just redoing it. And that's why we're seeing a lot of reboots, is because nobody has the skills to make anything new. But even when you see new releases on Netflix, they can just dump 10 episodes out for a show, and then they can leave you hanging for 3 or 4 weeks at least with no other show. There's no thought whatsoever towards somebody wanting to watch 3 or 4 different shows a week, or one show per day per week, or even 3 shows per day per week. I mean, inherently, if you were going to make 30-minute episodes, you could have an hour, 3 shows every day per week through a primetime lineup. So you're talking like 15 different shows where you're going to try and catch the attention of a lot of people for most of those shows, or at least half of those shows. You don't get that on Netflix, certainly. You don't get 15 new releases where you could even break that up. And Netflix doesn't even cater to something like that, where they could take 15 old shows and show you reruns, because that style is not preferred. Binge watching is much more preferred. Is there anything else I want to say? Well, there is one other thing as far as talking about the decline of entertainment. There is a anime shipper distributor called The Right Stuff. It used to be stuff spelled with 1 F. I think at some point they actually got therightstuff.com with 2 Fs. They were the premier place to go when you wanted to buy anime stuff, anime DVDs and Blu-rays, and I don't know if they were really around. They were a catalog shopping thing, that in the old days, where you would get fairly thick catalogs of different anime DVDs you could buy when I first started to use them many years ago, nearly a decade ago plus. And then they transitioned to being more online, and their catalogs got smaller and smaller catalogs, as there was less and less new shows coming out for them to advertise, or not enough consistency in their inventory to advertise. And less just new anime coming out per the time in which it would be reasonable to put out a catalog. I'm not, come to think of it, I'm not sure if I actually was getting the catalogs separate from orders as much as I was getting new catalogs every time I would order things, and I was just spending a lot of money ordering anime, as you pretty much had to get any anime at all, is that you were paying a fairly high premium for this niche entertainment. Well, the Right Stuff, which notably was run by a actual anime fan, or at least I assume as much, he sounded like it, Sean Kleckner, has been bought by Crunchyroll, which Crunchyroll just merged with Funimation and is owned by Sony, so this is effectively video game related or adjacent, in that Sony, the parent company, has now acquired the Right Stuff website. And Sony has been accused, and I think quite fairly, and I think it's been quite proven, of being kind of pro-censorship. So that's disconcerting, because there definitely were adult products that were sold appropriately. There was a whole show me the adult section to the Right Stuff. I don't think I could do anything right now. I think I have to do this, unfortunately. Yeah, I just don't think there's 3 here. So if I brought out a 3 and then merged it, maybe I can do that. So immediately in announcing that Crunchyroll now owns the Right Stuff, which at a certain point you could kind of say, alright, well that kind of makes sense that you would acquire people that have the shipping and the distribution down pat and are really fairly good at running that part of the business, which is the shipping that kills most businesses. But in acquiring it, they immediately announced that they were phasing out selling any adult content, which I haven't looked into the new store that they are just forcing everybody to now use, to at least to fulfill the standing orders as far as adult content, but I can't help but assume that is not going to be a good thing. Like, it is very unbelievable that that somehow is going to improve the situation for the last few people that still are trying to buy anime stuff and not buy it from Amazon.com, which, particularly for the nice looking box art and collections of anime, because they do put a lot of visual polish on that. Amazon, back when I was buying anime, was pretty bad about how they packaged DVDs and bounced them around, and I can't imagine it's any better. Like, I doubt that there's a specialist that is picking up DVD box sets and treating it with kids' gloves and not kicking it around and bending the corners and scratching it and putting thumbprint like indents in it, which all those things were things that to a certain level the Right Stuff was really good about not doing. Like, when you got a DVD, it tended to be great, in great shape, for the cardboard that the box sets are made out of. So yeah, unless the only way this could be potentially good news is that Sean Kleckner is actually going to start some other website, or that he's running the adult website, so the adult website might somewhat grow or maintain. I doubt it's going to grow. I can't help but blame myself in part because it has been probably over a decade since I've bought any anime DVD, and yet I still have some anime DVDs in shrink wrap even now, and will probably die before I ever actually got around to watching them. So yeah, I definitely went from being a heavy fan that was buying something from them like nearly every 2 weeks, if not more often, for a couple years, to just losing interest completely and not buying anything from the right stuff. And I can't blame myself really. It was hugely expensive and something I could afford to do when I really had no bills, and just a ton of money burning in my pocket and a ton of free time. But yeah, in general, it sounds like that is a bad turn of events, that is going to be less free speech and more censorship. I've barely paid attention to what's been going on with Right Stuff. I know they had like special programs that were bringing over some of the adult content in the old days, under, I think it was Pink Pineapple production line or distribution line. But I think really at a certain point that was also fairly stagnant, because the newer adult anime hentai content was not something that they really felt comfortable that they could either legally bring over, or they just wanted to bring over in general. Hentai from the 80s, like Bible Black, for instance, is a very famous one, was animated in that older anime style where the characters looked at least like they were 16 or 17 to a Western eyes, but hentai in a lot of cases nowadays, if it gets made at all in Japan, is going for more of that moe art style where the characters just get a little bit shorter and a little bit younger looking to a Western eye, and they I don't think we're ever particularly comfortable with that. Although what's funny there is you have both a censored and an uncensored version of, I want to say Mezzo Forte, but that's not what I'm really talking about, I think. I forget the name of it. Mezzo Forte, I think, was the kind of failed spin-off sequel of it, or TV version of it. Well, regardless, there was a fairly well-known fairly well-known anime with this young looking character in the 80s style that was turned into a assassin and abused and used. And because it was more in that 80s style, it still managed to come over. And in a more modern animation style, that same story really wouldn't have managed to come over. Actually, in fact, a lot of hentai from the old 80s and late 70s were just a lot more extreme as far as the ones that were actually getting ported over. And that probably has a lot to do with the tape trading that was going on, and just people knowing about these extreme shows. The show I'm thinking of actually was a spin-off of a anthology series called Cool Devices. One of the episodes was, I believe, called Yellow Star, and then that got expanded into the show I'm thinking of. But yeah, there is a history there. It's a history of a niche of an adult product. So effectively what I'm talking about is, if there was really only one major distributor and that was actually paying for the production of porn in the old days, say the maker of Debbie Does Dallas, or the maker, or Playboy as a bookshop, as a magazine, this is effectively on that same level, where the company that ran Playboy has just been bought by Sony at a certain level, and that probably was about half their business. And certainly the adult business for the right stuff was being supported by the non-adult business, so the two really were supporting each other for as long as they did. But yeah, at a certain level, Playboy is dead. Like, Playboy as a magazine, Hustle as a magazine is in no way as important as it once was, to the point where you could probably say the phrase Playboy to a teenager now, and there's a decent chance they won't even know what you're talking about. And even if they did know what you're talking about, they probably haven't ever seen one, and wouldn't be interested anyways. And at a certain level, by modern standards, I imagine some parents would consider Playboys fairly quaint compared to what else is on the internet. Alright. Well, that's about an hour of me rambling. I don't know if there was any other news that happened over the weekend. And the fact that most people probably didn't hear that Right Stuff has been acquired really goes to show how inside baseball it really is. Arguably, on the video game aspect of that, Right Stuff probably did import a few adult PC games or just anime PC games, but they probably didn't step into that too much. Had the Right Stuff spun off a Steam competitor where all the adult visual novels and everything were being sold, they probably would have succeeded a little bit better. But I also wouldn't be surprised if shipping and distribution being such a major focus of what they did was constantly making it difficult to make that business succeed, and then the pandemic and shortages probably just wrecked it. I'm getting a lot of redundant articles that I'm skipping through, but I imagine it's not too big of a deal with my program, the macro, opening all the apps for me, or opening all the articles for me. I'm starting to call everything an app, which that's a nightmare. Apparently the BBC had its first ever gaming prom, and it's now available to watch. This orchestral concert featured music from Kingdom Hearts and more. I don't like the phrase prom, I will say. The proms, which were founded in 1895, are a season of classical music concerts held every summer, mainly at the Royal Albert Hall in London. So I guess the idea is that in the UK that makes more sense to follow that tradition and use that same phrase, but to a Westerner, the idea of a gaming prom kind of just rubs me the wrong way. Maybe that's because I subconsciously actually believe the stereotype that a bunch of gamers probably wouldn't go to a prom. I'm not sure how many kids would go to a prom in general. Probably still a decent number of them. But the idea of just going to dance to music while being carefully watched by parents to not bump and grind to music doesn't sound like a hugely fun event. Whereas if you said it was a gaming concert, I wouldn't have that same assumption mentally to it. I do think that current and future generations of kids are all gamers, or most of them are all gamers, so it's not like I think they're neck-bearded losers that can't get a date to prom. Or at least I hope I don't subconsciously believe that, but yeah, I just don't like proms as a concept. Make a lot of sense. If anything, the schools really should think of something different to do instead of what I think proms look like. And maybe a lot of schools do have changed what proms are, and it just hasn't been really shown to me, as I don't deal with schools at all. But yeah, I could see a party happening with cake and music playing in the background and a DJ and things like that, but like square dancing, line dancing concept and slow music playing seems to be something that kids really wouldn't be interested in. I could imagine doing a party with like Korean K-pop music playing in the background and people waving pixie sticks or the glow sticks in the air, and being much closer to a rave minus the ecstasy. And I could imagine you could try to have different stations where there would be like a corner of people doing playing video games or watching movies or something else. As for the actual article there, and BBC having their orchestra play video game music, I've seen it before. I've never been impressed by the concept, really. For the most part, even the most outstanding songs from video games aren't that outstanding, and you would really need to do more of a deep dive around other kinds of activate this now, but let's not. You need to do a deep dive looking for good songs, not surface level songs from the top 100 games. Like, sure, we can all be slightly amused by hearing level 1 background music from Mario, but you don't want to spend 2 or 3 hours listening to that. Whereas some of the like more orchestral songs that started off as orchestral songs from like Heroes of Might and Magic 3 would actually be better suited for an orchestra to play them, and yet nobody is going to really consider that. How do I hide that? And then I would say there's probably a fairly heavy Western bias in a lot of cases there. You'll probably pick up some songs from Final Fantasy, but that will be about the only Eastern games that you would consider. Because at a certain level, also doing a gimmick orchestra thing like that will not actually be much of a gimmick if the people listening don't recognize the songs. Alright, I'm assuming that if I tried to activate this again, I can't. Alright, whatever, so. It sucks that you kind of need this card. I'd get rid of this card so it stops asking me to activate it. But yeah, at a certain level you can't make a deck where you can't activate anything and you don't have the options to activate anything. Moving on, let's see. Video Games Chronicle says the leaked Spider-Man screenshots show how it looks running on PC. I imagine it's going to look fairly good. I can't imagine that there's going to be anything more to say beyond that. Like worst case scenarios that would be that it looks actually terrible. I suppose there is a scenario where you could have just activated that guy's ability multiple times to have enough cards, which I may have already done that, but that's not a scenario I'm even keeping my eyes open for. Alright, well. Yep, I'm started early today, hoping that I could get things done before I started to feel sleepy, but I'm starting to feel sleepy. I don't even think I said today was August 8th, on Monday, so I don't even think I started with my usual spiel. I watched a YouTube video, trying to explain TikTok and and how it's kind of algorithms and being on the wrong side of TikTok, whatever that means, and how TikTok videos kind of can't pay out and kind of don't pay. Right, so we need he bought himself another turn there. Yeah, suffice it to say, I didn't learn a ton about TikTok, even watching a fairly long, in-depth look at it, other than to say, yeah, I don't think it's for me. I can't imagine it really working. Although, I also would have said the exact same thing about YouTube Shorts, and YouTube Shorts now are getting tons and tons of views. Like 40, 50 views in the first couple of hours. There does seem to be a real algorithm push there. I am definitely a bigger fish in a smaller pond doing YouTube Shorts. So yeah, I'll continue doing YouTube Shorts. Like, it's easy, it doesn't compromise the quality of my content, which the quality of my content was never high to begin with. It's not wasting a bunch of time that I would otherwise want to put into making footage. Now the compromise certainly may come after like October, though. I may start to just say, you know what, let's just put out one pre-recorded footage per day. I mean, you can't go any lower than that, really. And then put out 1 to 3 YouTube Shorts in that same time spot. Which inherently, if there were any other creator that suggested that, I imagine their fans would be very livid on that, the very suggestion. But yeah, I was already falling behind, so it's a convenient excuse certainly to reduce the amount of content I make. Does that mean that's not going to work? It may mean that's not going to work. That was the wrong move anyways. I should have summoned it. I needed something against this guy. Alright, well, I guess we'll set that instead. Let's see. Video Games Chronicles says more of the Last of Us remake footage appears online, which I guess you can check that out. Again, it feels like when these leaks happen, they're either done intentionally to get people hyped on the game, or they're done unintentionally by the creators and the actual leaks, but they still just lead to people getting hyped, and arguably, almost certainly, overhyped. There is, by the time you can leak something online, there's probably no more time left to adjust things. We have seen a few rare occasions where there's been a big enough public outcry that they've gone back to the drawing board after a leak has shown that the game was visually going in a weird direction. That was another thing I tried to look up, is to try to find a chart that would show different animation styles from anime or just from the West throughout the decades, and I really can't find one, or couldn't find one. I suspect the problem there is that there's no one artist who can animate every single types of style, and thus the best case scenario I saw, the closest thing I could see, was comparison websites that would just show comparisons of specific animes, which inherently a lot of anime styles are based on what anime studios tend to do from show to show, and often what individual shows look like. So like Ghibli is a prime example of that, where Studio Ghibli has a fairly consistent animation style. Let's see if after the fact that stops that ability from happening. And as far as comparisons to Eastern animation styles, nope, it did not work. You just don't have anything like that at all. There's individual shows you could compare to, but that's about it. Which that inherently leaves me to do nothing in the short term and the midterm, almost certainly, but in some distant future, if I ever actually was profitable being a YouTuber, I might hire an artist to straight up compare the different art styles to give me some kind of baseline I could point to, or to make one myself, just making a collage of certain shows. Particularly the art styles used in video games that come out on Steam is really a subset of the potential art styles out there, so I only need something that points out what a 70s anime versus an 80s anime versus a 90s anime versus a 2010s and modern animes tend to look like. And even at that, it's a fairly generic list of things I need to point to. Just the moe art style, the chibi art style, the 8-bit art style, what Western games in general tend to look like, which you'd call a Western art style, even though there really is no Western art style to exist. Yep. And this guy may be playing an Exodia deck, or he may be doing something else, who knows? It's hard to tell. Moving on with news, Multiversus Season 1 will add an arcade mode and ranked battle and more. So, yay. Like, good. The first season was due to launch next week before being delayed until later this month, which they delayed it, and now they're promising extra content, which seems like you would have announced both of those things in the same breath. Footage from the Diablo 4 alpha has appeared online, which, okay. What does that really mean? Like, if the only footage that's being shown is this one picture, that's not really much to go on. It looks fine, looks pretty. You can kind of focus in the background and see a person hanging and see a church and see some rocks, and I guess that's all you really need. Inherently, this is probably just the menu too, like, so it's not really showing you the parts of the actual gameplay that you would want to see. Apparently Tekken 8 is seemingly being teased. A Tekken 7 update trailer showing during EVO included a brief teaser. So I guess that means EVO happened. And EVO is just, since it is just a fighting game tournament, tends not to bring too much news to the general gaming world. But apparently this EVO has been a good opportunity to make some other announcements. So the first new Fatal Fury in 23 years has been announced, which that's probably about 13 years too long. Like, I can see taking 10 years off, but, or even going, hey, it's the 20th anniversary, let's announce a new game in development then, but 23 is an odd number. Might as well have waited 2 more years and said on the 25th anniversary. It's questionable whether SNK has the chops to make any kind of game nowadays. I don't know if SNK has made anything in 23 years as a developer. It's kind of questionable whether that is even the same SNK or if it is just a company that has bought the shell of SNK. It's highly unlikely after 23 years that there are that many people that even care about or remember Fatal Fury as a fighting game. And I've never really seen a case where the hint or suggestion of a resurgence or a fad of fighting games coming back actually led to a lot of fighting games coming back or being popular. Fighting games, I think, inherently are always just going to be niche properties. Just going to destroy this card, since I'm either going to win or lose fairly quickly here. In this case, I need to have enough to summon pretty much 2 of these guys, which I do have enough to do that. It's just going to be a matter of, can I actually succeed at doing that? And even if I did summon another one here, would I be able to activate the spell more than once? Nope, that wouldn't have worked either. This might buy me some time, though. Let's see. Modern Warfare 2 beta dates for PlayStation owners will get first access. Then Xbox and PC will get the beta the following week, according to Video Games Chronicles. I'm noticing also we're getting less articles in general from Video Games Chronicles, which is probably a good thing because they were starting to get fairly annoying with the pointless articles that they were putting out. Multiverse Datamine has found a Battle Pass sharing feature, which that's an interesting concept, but I'm not sure how it would be implemented in any positive way. Yeah, buying a Battle Pass and then being able to share a Battle Pass with your friends. It's an interesting idea. I guess you want this. Let's see, Nintendo will be hosting a Splatoon 3 Direct this week, which, yeah, Splatoon 3 is close to being announced. YouTube will hold its first ever interactive gaming live stream. The platform's biggest gaming special ever will feature popular streamers in Street Fighter 6. I have not heard anything about this at all. And so, yeah, that definitely seems odd as far as YouTube's consistent inability to advertise itself, considering how YouTube is an advertising company. But this is still your standard typical let's pick the winners and promote the winners and let's screw over everybody else situation with YouTube. And here you have like Matt Pat, which has had controversies, and 3 other characters I can't name, although I think I recognize at least 2 or 3 of these characters. You might as well call them characters, or because we only know them as characters and not real people. It's true with any YouTuber. The games that they're being shown, interestingly, also I think fall on that same category, in that they are games that are proven winners instead of being a little bit more experimental or those new games that you would want to give a chance to. Like, they're playing Among Us, Fall Guys, Fortnite, Free Fire. I haven't heard of that one, so that might be the oddball. Friday Night Funking, which I guess that's a little bit of an oddball. GTA 5, Minecraft, Mortal Kombat 11, Poppy Top Playtime, I don't know what that is. Rocket League, Street Fighter 6, Trackmania, and more. So maybe there is 2 or 3 games I haven't recognized. And then there's a whole list of people here that I don't really follow. Markiplier, Matt Pat, I recognize those names. Slap Nap. Nope. The Grumps, I guess maybe that's the 2 Game Grump people. Maybe. But yeah. There's like 3 names in a list of 20 that I recognize here. It is an interesting thing, but also inherently it is just advertisement, because I am fairly certain that most of these gamers are not really even that good of gamers, or you could even potentially make the argument they're not gamers at all. PewDiePie, noticeably, not on that list, and just persona non grata, I think, from any future YouTube thing. But yeah. Like the I have to actually play here. The idea that these YouTubers would actually be good at playing games and that they'd actually take a tournament seriously instead of just the whole thing potentially being scripted, which is very believable to me, is fairly low. Nor do I think they're actually good enough players that anybody should care about a tournament happening amongst these people. It's a tournament of losers, effectively, for lack of a better term. Not a tournament of actual skilled sports players. The equivalent of this would be if a bunch of celebrities went and played tackle football. Very few people, I think, will end on that victory, because I want to wrap up here, and I'm afraid I'm just getting more and more distracted and slower and slower to actually play and not getting through the news very fast. Yeah. While it might be interesting to see celebrities tackle each other, apparently I didn't win a single duel, or I just got this daily quest. No, wait, I must have just gotten this, or this is glitched, because that doesn't make any sense at all otherwise. And then the login and the Duel Live must be new too. And if I have 2 here, then that does mean I could have gotten 3 new and didn't have enough done, which I don't particularly care enough to worry about that. But yeah, as much fun as it would be to see a bunch of celebrities tackle each other, the reality of the case is, if you're interested in actual professional football, you're not going to watch a bunch of celebrities play football. If you're interested in professional gaming, you're not going to watch a bunch of YouTubers who at best are comedians when playing video games. Maybe a few of them actually do have some critical level to their content, but mostly they're just comedians using video games as a cheap background. Alright, let's burn through the news. As far as Komatsu news, Dengen Entertainment to publish a time set psychological thriller called Recall Empty Wishes for PC. I think we had already looked at this game, where this first screenshot looks slightly interesting, and then every other screenshot has this different art style, this more 8-bit art style. The Witch's House MV is coming to PS4, Xbox One, and Switch in 2022, which is apparently a JRPG game. There might be something to that, but probably not. Freedom Planet 2 is coming to PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch in summer of 2023, which I don't recognize a Freedom Planet 1. The name sounds slightly familiar, but looking at the game, it just looks like a platformer. A game called Calm has a teaser trailer, CALME. I found out that one of the terrible old games, X-Blades, actually has a spiritual successor called, I think, Blades of Time, if I'm getting the names right, that is actually fairly well rated on Steam. and I don't think I own Blades of Time, so theoretically, if I was even going to buy any games this year at all, I would buy Blades of Time. That way I could look at X Blades and either rush through it or rage quit it once it proves to be just not worth the effort to actually play, and then move to Blades of Time and actually play a good game. And those are the kinds of connections and narrative flows I'd like to have more of when I play games, but often I do just jump from one completely unconnected game to the next completely unconnected game, and that's okay too. Gametsu says Novex Project Codename M Detective part has a detective part trailer, which looks like a weird visual novel. The blur. Looks like the character is just talking. This girl with this giant coat. And then actual murder mystery scenes. And they're kind of cheaping out here because a lot of these characters are just wearing these masks, so they don't have to animate faces. But then they also kind of doing more polish than normal because they're having the characters actually move around and be highly animated instead of just standing around. Interesting, to say the least, as far as the animation styles go. So I'd have to assume that this very well may be the killer and you play as a detective. Yeah, I'm just kind of wincing here still at the fact that we have way too many visual novels that are not voiced, or way too many games that need to be voiced and that aren't voiced. I could see an alternate reality where the pandemic and people just having to stay home would have had enough people build good recording studios in their house that more things could be voiced. But honestly, it would be a crawl to the bottom. It would be people that lost their jobs willing to do like what would have been probably thousands of dollars of voice acting now for pennies. That would be the only way that we'd have more games voiced, is if you could just do something like Fiverr to get an entire game voice acted and get a decent amount of voice acting from that. Which I'm a little surprised there isn't a site that I know of that actually does something like that, where it's these are straight up visual novels. We need you to voice all these lines of dialogue, and we're going to pay you a minimal thing, but you can then at least call yourself a published voice actor and build up your portfolio. Not that that probably will matter too much, because voice actors tend to be highly incestuous as far as who they hire and unwilling to allow new blood. Moving on, Post Void for the PS5 and PS4 and Switch launches September 29th. And certainly I don't want to be a voice actor. I should point that out. I don't think I have any skill in that. Guilty Gear Strive has an upcoming update scheduled, shared at EVO 2022. We may get to the point where EVO does become half announcements, half video game tournament. If it's filling a void. Persona 4 Arena Ultimax for PS4 and PC has its rollback netcode update now available. It seems so weird that there's so many games that promise rollback netcode after the fact, instead of either just saying we're never going to get it to work for this game, we'll put it in the next game, we promise, or just saying just having it from day one. The idea of having to update your entire netcode after the game is launched sounds really crazy. King of Fighters DLC characters, I feel like we had already covered this from Gematsu. Samurai Showdown, spelled without the W always, to add rollback netcode in spring of 2023. I guess maybe this is just a case where it has been forced and demanded. And this is an SNK game, so I guess SNK has been working on some fighting games. Blazing Strike has been delayed to spring of 2023, no longer due out this fall. A pixel art fighting game called Pocket Bravery launches in early 2023 for basically everything except Stadia. Which I shouldn't have to really say except Stadia when I say basically everything at this point. There probably would be some common vernacular that you could develop, say the big three plus, but that would be just as complicated. Like if you said the big three, then you'd probably be talking PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. And the big 3 plus would then be PS5 and Xbox Series. But then you'd still want to say and PC. Or you go the big 4 includes PC. But sometimes you get Xbox and PS4 and PC. And sometimes you only get PS5 and Xbox Series and not PS4 and Xbox One. So it's just kind of all over the place. There's no consistency that will ever be there. A game called Pixel Jump Scrappers Deluxe has been announced for PC. Yeah, another game under the Pixel Junk name. I don't know if they all play the same though. I don't really think they do. I think each Pixel Junk game plays a little bit differently. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl has Hugh Neutron now available. Which, yeah, not a hugely popular character, I would suspect. Street Fighter 6 has a real-time commentary feature adding Tasty Steven and James Chen, which I feel like the commentary feature already existed for whatever little it was worth, and now just adding more people to comment. Oni Road to the Mightiest, Oni, second trailer, details and screenshots are announced. Oni was another one of those like bad anime looking games. That was the video I was looking at on YouTube, is games that were heavily influenced by anime but were actually made by Western developers. And there was a game called Oni that came out in the early days of the Xbox 360 that definitely looked like an anime game, but wasn't made by a Japanese company, and actually was more just kind of a half lewd, half porn game, half first person shooter. It has nothing to do with Oni, this Oni game, Road to the Mightiest Oni, because Oni is just demon in Japanese. What's interesting about that thought, though, certainly is there are some pretty awful games that people have copyrights to, probably still own the copyrights to, and it wouldn't be crazy to try to reboot or relaunch those series just by the name alone, and then change everything else, or with the character alone but change everything else. Oni, for instance, on the cover was like a, I think, pink-haired anime girl with her clothes melting off. So you could certainly say, hey, we'll do that same character, but we'll not do the clothes melting off part, and we'll give her the same name, but we'll give her a completely different character. Effectively, the Tomb Raider reboot has shown how you can take a character, call it Lara Croft, and make it be nothing like Lara Croft of the old days, and people are forgetful enough to put up with that. Moving on, Skullgirl's second encore DLC character Marie has been announced. Skullgirl's second encore, I guess, is the most recent Skullgirls game. Dracom announces Tokyo Stories for console and PC from the Rain director Yuki Akita. I don't know what Rain is. What's interesting here is that while this has a pixely art style, I really can't call this the 8-bit art style, because the 8-bit art style has like a limited amount of pixels per character. It's like usually somewhere around 64 by 64, 128, even 256 by 256 pixels. If you were to draw a box around this character being animated here, you're talking probably a lot more pixels than that. Plus, you see a ton of other things being rendered, which that's just not in line with what an 8-bit art style game would look like. So there's a potential beginning here for an idea of a pixel anime combination as a new art style. Although I suspect it will fail miserably, because if there's one thing anime is, it's vain, and they want to see things as pretty as possible. Anime fans do. Speaking from experience there. So I would suspect that in actual depiction and movement, it doesn't look as good as they do. And inherently, I have a blur over this video, so because the video is blurred, it is actually smoothing out the pixeliness that you should be seeing on this trailer. Yeah, and so this actually looks fairly decent with the blur on. If I was to turn the blur off, it would look a lot worse. Maybe it's a case here that this developer had made these development movies first, and that's why they're leaning so heavily into this art style, because it was an artist's desire to actually animate things in a pixely art style first, and perhaps the video game concept came second. I guess I could also say I watched a video of a bunch of Yandere Simulator clones, and just listing off how they've all kind of failed miserably. Yeah, I don't think the gameplay concept is there. Like, I just don't. If you're gonna make a Metal Gear Solid stealth type game, which is what it probably needs to be, but you're running around the same school over and over again, that's gonna get boring. But also, I just think playing as an antagonist and not a good guy or good girl in a Yandere Simulator is just not a good idea for most types of games. But also, I think there's just too much toxicity around that idea with decade, it feels like now, of Yandere Simulator not being finished. Inherently, though, most of the clones started from a bad starting point. Either they were made to prove that Yandere Simulator could have been finished by now, which is true in my opinion, but that's starting from a negative point, which is not going to feed your creativity, and it's also not your original idea, so your passion can only go so far there. Eventually you're going to realize you're just ripping off someone else, or they come from the perspective of a game that was just going to be a low effort asset flip anyways, and they just threw Yandere in the name to get a few more sales. But yeah, there seemingly has been no more progress as far as Yandere Simulator or anything like that, and yeah, I just don't think there ever would be. It really needs to be a horror game. You need to get rid of the stealth aspects for the most part. You need to be the good guy, avoiding the crazy girl, and you could make the game work very well. It's a horror game. You're trapped in a school. There's a yandere around killing off people. You play as perhaps the male love interest, or you play as the female competitor to the love interest that the yandere is jealous of, and you try to escape. It would be potentially like a Saw video game where you do everything right to get to the ending, and then you still end up getting captured and killed by the yandere, which would just be the big boss of the game, and it would leave room for a sequel, certainly. A horror game with like puzzles and traps and escape the room games would be fine. Actual just punching or shooting or stabbing is probably not a gameplay mechanic you would want to use. Chase sequences and escape the room puzzles would make way more sense. Moving on, though, I'm rambling and this is not going to finish this stream any faster. Melty Blood Type Lumnia has details for a summer 2022 update. Another fighting game. This was a fighting game that has this DLC character that's way smaller and must have a really high hitbox, because here you have a anime girl doing an extremely high kick, and it's seemingly making contact on that small character when it visually wouldn't actually make contact. Dragon Ball FighterZ is coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series with rollback netcode, and apparently the PC version is also getting rollback netcode, which is great. Although, for me, I already own Dragon Ball FighterZ. I don't think I own all the seasons of all the characters, and I probably will barely ever play it and only play it in single player mode, so I'm uniquely not going to benefit from this, but most people will. And it's definitely nice to see FighterZ still being supported when there's other Dragon Ball games they could have focused solely on. Kingdom Fighters 15 DLC characters have been announced alongside of Season 2. Interesting collection of characters here. You got some variety here. And then Chinese girl, probably Japanese guy, and then African ancestry, at least lady. There is a slight difference in the art styles here. This guy in the middle feels like he's probably the oldest animated character, whereas this one seems like it might be a little bit newer, and I would suspect this is the newest art style. It just feels like there's a little bit more shadow and toning going on with this drawing compared to this guy who barely has any shadowing and toning on, or this girl that has a little bit of shadowing but not as much. Of course, that's all just baseless speculation. This could all be new characters. Then you just also have some other characters here that look way out of the art style. It does make me wonder if they don't have just several different animators. Of course, it seems like these are from different games, so the different art styles would make a lot of sense. Yeah, seems like they're pulling different characters from different series for the King of Fighters series. A Tekken 7 Battle Balance update launches August 17th, and a new Tekken game has seemingly been teased. And it's just going to be all fighting games today, isn't it? And once again, I have failed to update the languages of games to look through. So again, we may see some adult games, but they probably will be mostly Western adult games, like only FAP Simulator 2 here, which is rated very positively. I will give them that. Not sure if there's a real game here. It's basically seems to be CGI girls, anime girls with CGI girls with different colored hair running OnlyFans type site. Not a terrible idea. I don't see though how you actually control anything. Like if it's a clicker or what. Yeah, it seems like it's some kind of simulation game. Again, that's a Western adult game that leads to only supporting English. But until I start to include Japanese only games, which I should, because Japanese only games deserve to be looked at, specifically Japanese only games, I'm still kind of willing to exclude many other languages. Although, you know what? Korean games wouldn't be that big of a deal either. If I was to say Korean language games are also allowed, that probably would only add 2 or 3 games a week at most. And I could probably, in that idea, include all languages with the exception of the bad behaviors, bad actors, which would just be Russian games and Chinese language games. If I just exclude Chinese and Russian games, I could still get a general idea of what the worldwide releases are on Steam. How many Minesweeper games does Steam need? Apparently one more. But yeah, that would be much more free speech and much more. I wish there were a few more screenshots of this game. I might have given it a chance. But yeah, it's only Russian language games and only Chinese games that flood the Steam market. It's bad, and the bad apples have spoiled the bunch in my mind. Whereas every other language is so infrequently supported that I can include all of them and still give them a chance. This Lightworkers as a animation thing. It's already on the follow list. Pretty much anything already on the follow list can't get another YouTube short. Pocket League story. That looks like it might be something, so I'll give that a follow. Anime Studio Story. I think we'll say no to that. Inherently, I guess that does bring about the question about, is this a simulation game? Yeah, it is, but the idea of being a soccer manager sounds like an animation game that's actually fairly good compared to running an anime studio, which doesn't sound interesting. That's not how it happened. Seems to be a visual novel with some gimmicks. I don't know if you actually play a beat 'em up section here or not. This is another free game, so I can say just check it out if you're interested. I don't even know if there's really a value in putting free games on the follow list. That looks like nothing. That looks like nothing. Here we have a game tagged with sexual content 69 penny hot, which is a giant breasted flat Western animation style girl, I would say. And it looks like it is just matched to, and then you get some CG, some not CG, but flat 2D images of her in different poses showing off different things. It's just that one girl though. And there's perhaps an argument against any game that only shows you one girl as far as an adult game. Again, would have been a Western game in my mind. And the numbers are starting to skew over the weekend as far as games that came out, as far as Western adult content and Eastern adult content. Yeah, I don't think that looks particularly that interesting. That doesn't look that interesting. Nothing there. Nothing there. Still running into the large majority of games being easy to dismiss. This Luna Sky RDX might be something, but it does compromise me at a certain point as far as would I want to put this in a YouTube follow, YouTube short. And I guess at a certain point I'm holding the standards of YouTube shorts higher than the follow list, because I'm willing to put this on the follow list, but I'm not willing to put it on the shorts. We have another jigsaw puzzle game. Fairly consistent seeing these. Here we have another jigsaw puzzle game, which I guess if I got desperate for YouTube shorts, or if I just really tried to push it, doing jigsaw puzzles would be a smart move. Doing these pictocross games would also make a lot of sense. There is definitely a fandom out there for some of these types of games. Game Boy looking games, pictocross games, jigsaw puzzle games, and yet I may give this a follow, but I'm still not willing to put it on the YouTube shorts. There's definitely a fandom for the solitaire games. Obviously there's at least a few hundred people that buy almost every solitaire game that ever exists. This game Capitals. came out. I feel like it said it was coming soon a few days ago. There definitely is room for Steam to say, if you put a game as coming soon, you then have to wait 30 days to actually release the game. So only put coming soon if it's coming out in at least 30 days. Yeah, I almost would consider this game too. I would have considered it if it had been like the Nvidia fairies flying around. Interesting. It's like a Saw game with almost like South Park animation styles. I'll wait till it actually comes out. But yeah, if they had just a hard limiter, say you can't say your game is coming soon until 30 days after you've said it's coming soon. If you had that limiter, that would probably stop enough people from bothering to even put their websites live. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people put their websites live as coming soon because they just think that's what they're supposed to do because of bad communication between them and Valve. Alright, well, this Tyrant's Blessing looks animated enough for a YouTube short. I don't know if I really want to put it on a follow list, but well. But yeah, we've burnt through most of these games. There's another adult game, and My Bunny Girl in this case. While I still suspect this is a Western animated game, I do think that there's at least more of an anime feel to this. You have Bunny Girl showing different poses. Seems like she is actually a bunny, maybe doing match 3 Candy Crush. Not the worst idea, certainly, for that type of game. Selling for 84 cents also. As far as the actual languages it says it supports, it has a long list, but Japanese is not in the top selection. So again, I doubt this is a Japanese game. And at least in that case, it kind of makes a little bit more sense that you would have one character only focused on this. The next game we have on the Steam, I can't show you, is called Southern Princesses, which is a lot of tanned or dark-skinned girls with different hair color in lounging lewd nude poses, and that seems to be all the screenshots they're showing you. They say the game is memory, but they don't show a single picture of the gameplay. And that game says it's coming soon again, and it's English only again. Yep. At a certain point here, I should really just be complaining about there not being any Japanese visual novels at all, whether they're adult or not. My argument perhaps is better shown with the statistics using adult games, but honestly, if we just took a step back and said, of all the Western visual novels that are going to be released on a day-to-day basis compared to the Eastern visual novels, the number of Western visual novels getting released seems to be way higher than it should be. But it is kind of hard to point to actual visual novels that are Eastern visual novels that have come out recently that haven't come out on Steam. Part of the problem, I think, runs into just the decades and decades of old Eastern visual novels not being on Steam. So that's something that's harder to even measure or figure out. I'll give this game a follow. No, wait, I'll wait till it actually comes out. So, throughout that whole list of games I just looked at, there is only 2 worth even making a YouTube short on, and maybe only 4 or 5 worth actually putting on the fall list. So, I imagine that is going to be the way it goes until a while, like for the next 6 months or so. They will just have fewer and fewer games announced and coming out as we get too close to the Black Friday and Christmas holidays, and once we're past the point where you would actually think you could sell a game for Christmas, then you will be into that drought of January and February, which we've already been in a drought, so I imagine it will be a drought on top of a drought. Meanwhile, another reason why anime games may not be showing up on Steam as much is because they're just skipping over to smartphones. The Idolmaster Cinderella Girls, for instance, was a smartphone game, but it's also ending its service on March 30th, 2023. The game has been, this social game has been around for 11 years, which is arguably quite a long time for Bandai Namco and Side Games to actually support it. I don't think Idolmaster is particularly that popular at this point. Doraemon Story of Seasons, Friends of the Great Kingdom, launches November 2nd in Japan for the PC, PS5, and Switch. This is a kids' Japanese game. Demon Slayer, new DLC character, launching August 10th. My throat is super dry. EVO Japan 2023 is set for March 31st to April 2nd. It'll feature Guilty Gear Strive, King of Fighters 15, Street Fighters Champion Edition, and Tekken 7. And EVO Japan is not the main EVO, so we may get some more announcements. Street Fighter 6 adds a newcomer called Kimberly Injury. Kimberly is new. She's of African descent character. Jory is not new, but relatively new. I think she was added in the previous game, or maybe as a DLC character in the previous game. There is, I suppose, maybe a slight danger in having a game with a minority in your fighting game. But I don't think the danger is particularly that high. There could be some SJWs out there that say, "Oh, nobody wants to play this character because she's female. Nobody wants to play this character because she's black," or you could even flip it the other way and say everybody is setting up this character and then letting it lose just so the other player can beat up a black female or beat up a female, which all of those kinds of nonsense stories could be published, to say the least. But yeah, inherently, any fighting game, you want the characters to visually be as diverse as possible. not by race, but just by what they look like, and having characters of different nationalities is a great way to do that. Certainly. But there is a history of controversy there, certainly, in which Street Fighter 2's intro scene has a guy punching a black guy in one version, and then they lightened the skin of the character and effectively digitally whitewashed the character in a different version. I believe it was in the Western version they digitally whitewashed it, or in a re-release they digitally whitewashed it. And I think in that case, since we're talking Street Fighter 2 and that was so long ago, that very much may have just been the Japanese thinking there would have been more controversy than there actually would have been. But that still tends to be a major problem, in that we have Japanese companies thinking there will be controversy and preemptively self-censoring because they think there will be actual controversy that's worth listening to. Inherently, Japanese companies, because there's so few people in Japan, if they're told that there's 10,000 retweets on some controversy, that's some made-up SJW type controversy, they see that 10,000 as a big number, but they fail to recognize or remember that the world has like 7 billion people in it, and they look at it more as, well, Japan only has probably, I bet Japan has about 200 million people in it at most. I may be way off on that estimate, so the ratios would just feel different to them. And even one complaint may be one complaint too many in the Japanese people's minds. And they just don't have a thick enough skin a lot of times. Moving on, Guilty Gear Strive DLC character Bridget announced and launches today. I feel like these characters, they're saying they were announced, but I feel like I saw a character like this already. Maybe it was in a different game, I don't know. Here we have yet another Alice Gear's Aegis teaser announcement, which the game still looks horrible. The Diofield Chronicle game explanation trailer is now available according to Gamatsu if you want to check that out. Which on Holy Night for the PS4 and Switch has the Ayako Aizaki trailer. If you want to check that out. I guess this is also in part the problem with starting a stream fairly early, in that you will effectively have a very little news that came out on Monday. But at this point, I've also kind of given up on the idea of news coming out on Mondays for video games. It just doesn't seem like it happens. It seems like we're getting way more announcements late Tuesday and Wednesday. So Wednesday has just turned into the big day. Fridays often are fairly busy too, because things come out on Thursday or Friday, early Friday. I think had already talked about Melty Blood type Lumia's free DLC character, so I don't think we need to cover that again. And then the Splatoon Direct for August 10th, for Splatoon 3. Arc Raiders has been delayed to 2023 according to Gamatsu. I don't know if I've seen anything about this game so before. Dragon Quest Treasures details treasures and how to find them. Which, okay. At a certain level, it really does feel like the Dragon Quest series is just trying to break up what at one point would have been a comprehensive JRPG game into several side games that only focus on aspects of what would be in a standard Dragon Quest game. And I don't know if that's a good idea it might be a good idea, certainly for some people, to take what may have been too big of an RPG in the first place and segment it out. But it just feels like nobody is going to be on the same page if you do something like that. And then we have Alice's Warped Wonderland Recollection announced for Switch and PC. Switch version due out August 25th. I don't think this is the American McGee's Alice. Nope, Nightmare Studios, Nightmare Studio Products. This is just a visual novel in the Alice in Wonderland narrative. Alright, so nothing particularly special there. I stopped checking, but I would assume that Spicy Horse games still are not listed on Steam. Never heard any news about it being back up. But also, there's really nothing new to report there. That American McGee's retweeting people and doing his streams again, I would assume, although I haven't seen him restream since his first stream back, which, having a new kid, makes a lot of sense that he wouldn't stream. And I suspect that may very well be just the case, is that between being locked down and having a kid, he is just so busy and he doesn't delegate to anybody else to stream without him, I would guess. Then we have some GameDeveloper.com articles. Square Enix eyeing the idea of selling its stake in its remaining Western studios, which we had already talked about that. Activision has issued an apology after being accused of plagiarizing a Call of Duty cosmetic. The concept artist called the publisher out after noticing that the Loyal Samoyoid cosmetic looks very similar to their own work. And here you can see, I guess this is the original work, and the actual head here of a dog you probably don't want to focus too much around, but then this scarf pattern here seems to be fairly similar to this. The backpack slash extra gun loop here, elbow pad connecting, I guess, to an elbow pad here. Yeah, belt connecting to a belt. The leg pants connecting to a leg pants. Still, that's the one that I don't see a real visual connection. Everything else looks very similar, and it does just seem like some artist somewhere straight up copied somebody else. And here you can see on this article, it remains unclear, however, exactly how the company erred in its process and what, if any, compensation Lin received. So they may have put out an apology and nothing else, or they may have a non-disclosure agreement. And then here's an interesting story. Unity has partnered with Microsoft to utilize the Microsoft Azure Cloud Computing Services, which that might be an interesting as far as making games in Unity. I don't know if there's really a lot of value in making games in Unity anymore at all, though. Like, I think we may be very quickly approaching a point where everything should just be in the Unreal Engine, and if you're not capable of making it in the Unreal Engine, then you probably aren't capable of making a game at all, because Unity is just not running their business well, that you would want to do that. Let's do some fall list cleanup here. We have one from 2021 called The Miserable Crimson Hooded Girl. which I don't even know why this would have been on the follow list, so we can take that off. Yep, I'm gonna start pulling my back and spraining my back, reaching forward for the keyboard if I'm not careful. Here we have a game called The Metamorphosis from 2020, which I kind of like the visuals here as a visual novel, but it's really barely on the line here. Steam rating, SteamDB says it's 74.54, where positive here it says 90. So SteamDB probably was only updated in October of 2020. It says as full voice acting. I don't know if I really believe that anymore. You know what, I'm just gonna leave this and think about it later. But really I should have taken it off. I think on the other hand we can probably get rid of this one. A German, English and German language visual novel. All Ashes and Illusions. That's the one we looked at a couple days ago. And then the meaning is obviously mixed now, so we can remove that from the follow list. This is an adult game from October 7th, 2021. Make sure it's YouTube family friendly. Yeah, the screenshots are fine. Yep, nobody's particularly interested in it, so this also can leave the follow list. It's not relevant. Magnificent Truffle Pigs is mixed, so we can get rid of that. Yeah, the fact that so many of these follow list games are also becoming easier to get rid of probably says something. Although this one I kind of want to say no to, but it meets the requirements, so I'm just going to leave it on the follow list. Inherently, unless I get the follow list down to such a small number than where I'm just seeing the same games over and over again, I can just go through the follow list over and over again. Like we're at the T's right now. It'll probably take weeks, if not months, if not years, to get to Z's. Once we get to Z's, we'll just go back to A's. This Lost Shrine escape room has no relevancy, so we can get rid of that. Let's see, Legends of Redwall. What's funny is this Legends of Redwall's The Scout Act 3 should have a lot more follower. Let's see. Act 1 is on the wish list, so well, I should, if I'm gonna get the first act, I should just get the whole game. Let's see. Act 2, Act 1. Act 1 here, you can see it's mostly positive and made it to the wish list. Act 3, I don't know how many Redwall game books or books there are, so I don't know if Act 3 is the last one. Then you have Redwall 2 here coming out in April and having considerably less relevance. I think we probably put this on the wish list, though and we put this on the wish list also. I think we just triple down on the idea of all the Redwall games. Including this one. And if I decide I am gonna ever get the Redwall games, I'll just get them all. You can see there's a fairly big difference here though, in that this one was very popular from 2018 and then it came out with a soundtrack. This one's not really relevant at all for the same price. This one's not really relevant at all for the same price. Arguably, maybe the Redwall series for $10 is justifiable, whereas for $30 it isn't. And then you have a side game here that came out, let's see, just a month after the Lost Legends of Redwall. The Scout Act 1 came out. Of course, I may very well find a I may very well find a different play as a mouse game, and that would then justify it would make more sense to play that other game if it's cheaper or there's fewer sequels. It just takes less time. I hate to think about buying games just to save time or playing games because they'll take less time. No, that would be a terrible reason. Yeah, I'm not getting very far. YouTube Gaming gave out a shout out here for 30 million subscribers for Dream. I feel like when they do specific numbers where somebody gets 30 million, they probably should shout out somebody who made 20 million or 10 million subscribers in particular. Like, and maybe that's an unfair comparison, certainly, to say, hey, Dream just got 30 million, but also you could say on this day Dream got 30 million, this person got 20 million, this person got 10 million, and make it more of a generic. The point there being that it would be a lot nicer if they actually shouted out a group of people, even fairly large streamers, instead of just the specific people that they want to succeed and win. ScumVM has some more development for Lila or Obsidian. The first game of the Mtropics engine is ready for public testing. Okay, so they're looking for people to public test Obsidian with their new version of the ScumVM, which at this point has long since stopped being anything around actually Scum games, because all of those games are fully supported at this point. It is also possible, compared to like YouTube creators here, where you could just highlight people's anniversaries. In this case, they're highlighting their own anniversary of the YouTube Creator Awards. 10th anniversary for that. There you go. If you upload a short you've created elsewhere, please make sure any copyrighted protected material you've used is approved for use on YouTube. Mostly that means music, but also other sites let you use other people's content on the same site but not other people's sites. I don't think YouTube Creators has anything else to say. So, alright, so let me just quickly scroll through my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news worth mentioning. And then that will be the end of this stream. Apparently the Sonic Movies producer is reportedly working on a live-action Pac-Man. I have no idea how you would make a live-action Pac-Man. That really feels like if you're going to do something like that, it's going to be a joke movie where you are effectively a human trapped into a Pac-Man game. Which, yeah, suppose you could do something like that, but I don't think that is that interesting of an idea. I mean, we already had Pixels, so making another Pixel sounds like a dumb idea. I mean, the number of times people have made dumb video game based movies or TV shows, mostly movies, has been way too high. Really shows they don't know it. That Freevee channel that I mentioned way back at the beginning of the stream does have like the Uncharted the Uncharted movie in it, so at some point I probably should sit down and watch that. I think I did also watch a few more of the Netflix Resident Evil TV series, and it's really still not going anywhere. So yeah. But yeah, there's not a lot of good no, not really any good video game movies out there besides a few handfuls. Maybe the Sonic movie is the only good video game movie out there, and even at that, the Sonic movie is closer to like the Mario Brothers movie from the 80s in that it's its own thing. Apparently, an influential electronic music duo called Outer Shiri claimed they almost scored Metroid Prime, which musicians thinking they almost got the contract to do something is just what agents tell a lot of people. So, and even if it was true that they were second place in the running, that doesn't really mean anything. It's not really relevant. There's an interesting point here where YouTube advertisers retweeted this person that said YouTube creators are professionals at what they do. They are ever even inspiring brands to expand their limits. Listen in as experts. Some of them, my colleagues, share the driving factors behind the creator economy, which you just don't hear that statement, certainly, that YouTube creators are professionals ever, because they have a tendency not to particularly act in what you would consider a professional manner, although arguably what is a professional manner even in most jobs, the idea of professionalism, I think, was always more of a fiction than a fact, and always had and they just often use the idea of professionalism as a way to beat down people they don't like, or abuse people's actions, or restrict people's actions. Like, when you hear stories, certainly of Activision Blizzard CEO acting in an incredibly unprofessional manner, I wouldn't be surprised if there were people, middle managers, claiming that other people were acting unprofessionally all the time, while only looking downward and never looking upward. There is an interesting idea, certainly, as far as more of a legal requirement to act professionally, whatever that would really mean. It probably should exist. Like, it is completely unfair that a boss can be a childish, unprofessional jerk, and as long as he doesn't physically assault or sexually harass his employees, he's free to do whatever he wants, with no real consequences. And so maybe there should be some bigger limitations there, better restrictions. But nope, that doesn't happen anywhere, certainly. I guess I'm just scrolling down at this point through my old tweets, so there's not anything new to say. There's this Minecraft Educator Edition that has a lesson here, teaching online safety with Minecraft with Cyberspace Suite, Home Suite. I guess. It's free on the Minecraft Marketplace, but I don't know if that means it's actually free to everyone or if you have to have Education Edition. But yeah, there's yeah, you have to have Education Edition, then you have to go to the marketplace, then you have to read the blog, according to them. Where that definitely feels like that should have been something that was just available for everybody if they really cared, or if they were actually saying anything useful, which I definitely suspect they're not saying anything that kids haven't heard a million times before. Certainly, safety online is an important thing, but a lot of kids have heard it before and are jaded to those warnings, and until they learn that lesson themselves in at least a small way, they won't really listen to adults. And that is true for kids for most things, is that they won't listen to anecdotal examples of things going wrong for other people. They'll only listen and believe once they've seen it happen to themselves or their friends. So arguably, there almost should be a staged event where every year you have one kid say, "Oh, my Facebook got hacked," and just go through the whole process of his Facebook being hacked and him being really wrecked by it. But you'd have to have a great actor to show something like that, or and yeah, it would be deceptive to say the least anyways, to do it that way. Anyways, today's felt like a fairly low energy stream, and let's just end it here. That's going to be it for this stream. Hopefully the audio filtering, noise filtering didn't change anything. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. I feel like as I'm going to get more and more viewers on the YouTube Shorts, subscribers may be more necessary than ever. Although maybe subscribers will come from the YouTube Shorts, who knows. But there is this potential where a lot of people just watch the YouTube shorts and then it doesn't help and maybe even actively hurts my other content because they don't subscribe to it, or they watch so little as far as the watch time. Anyways, if you want a friend to follow me on any other social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.